Uncle gets divorced, and his wife has the best revenge ever. Unfortunately, my uncle is an idiot and is now in prison. My uncle divorced his wife after 15 years after she caught him cheating. They split everything evenly, even the land that the house they lived in sat upon. As soon as she had the title, she built a house right next to his. Of course, in compliance with all rules regarding distance and so on. It was a very pretty stone house, something my uncle had always wanted. For months my uncle watched her live her life. She spent much time in her garden, so he had to see her constantly. What soured his mood further? He then thought it would be a good idea to get goats. One of them, probably one who behaved particularly badly, he named after his ex. So you could hear him constantly shouting her name around the area that the goat shouldn't do this or that. His ex called the police a few times about the goats, which caused my uncle quite a bit of trouble with the police. Unfortunately, he wasn't very good with money either, so he soon had to sell his house. Showdown. His ex offered to buy the house. My uncle agreed. They finished the papers. The day she picked up the documents for the house from the attorney, he set his house on fire. When his ex came home, the fire brigade was there, and they watched the newly bought house burn down. Meanwhile, my uncle sat on the grass the whole time, watched the spectacle with some beer in hand, and immediately admitted that he had set it on fire. My uncle is now in prison for arson, and his ex is looking forward to another round in. My high school sweetheart wants to blackmail me after our first time having sex. Luckily, she's not the brightest. I dated Ava when I was in high school. We were both 16 and in the same class, so we saw each other daily. It was a sweet little romance. At least up to the point when we had intimacy for the first time. It was all wholly consensual, and the typical first time between teenagers who don't know what they are doing. I fondly think back to the evening, at least as far as the evening itself is concerned. The day after, Ava's friends gave me weird looks and whispered like they were discussing some important secret. During the break, Ava came over to me and told me that if I didn't give her any money, she would go to her mom and say I forced her to sleep with me. I was so perplexed at first that I didn't know what to say. Then I remembered that she had written to me that evening about how nice she had found it, and that she would like to do it again, with me. So I just shrugged and told her to F off. 2 days later, I was called to the principal's office. At first, I saw the police. Ava's mother and my mother were waiting for me too. The principal told me about the allegations against me. Ava stood crying behind her mother and put on a good show that she was afraid of me. I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket without comment and showed the police the messages, including the one Ava had texted me in the last few days mentioning that she wanted $100 or she would talk to her mom. The whole drama was over as quickly as it started, and Ava had to change schools because, of course, word got around about what she was trying to do. The girl really wasn't the brightest bulb. Cops have read it. What's the most illegal thing you've seen someone do and been like, screw it? I don't have time for this, and let them go about their business. My stepmom was a detective sergeant for 17 years, and one evening they were called to the scene of a home robbery. They arrive. There was only a young man sitting on the front steps, had his breaking and entering bag beside him, a duffel bag full of stuff, and he had a laptop on his lap. He gave them all the stuff back and said he couldn't take it, and then turned the laptop on. He said that he had some kind of technology that can crack the login password to computers, and he had gotten into the laptop. He found some of the most awful photos on the laptop. My stepmom couldn't and wouldn't go into details, but she and the other officers on the case were required to attend therapy sessions when the case closed. The kid who robbed the house said he was just trying to wipe the computer and reset it so he could sell it so he could buy things. But he said he didn't want to have anything to do with the photos, and he wanted the homeowners arrested. My stepmom was the senior officer on the scene, and she let him go with a minor trespass citation, and told him he had a good heart, but he needed to clean his life up. The homeowners were arrested for the materials. What public figure has done horrible things, but people continue to follow or support them? Logan Paul. A long time ago, he was the most controversial person on YouTube for filming a body. Throughout the years, he had a massive turnaround, one of the biggest comebacks YouTube had ever seen. His content became sensible and entertaining, and he wasn't an annoying person anymore. His podcasts, while usually immature, were entertaining. However, on this podcast, he began repeatedly mocked his best friend for his belief in God. It began to be an occurrence with every new episode. Just recently, he was exposed for being involved in a huge scam with the cryptocurrency project he was creating. When confronted by Kovsila, his response addressed none of the points brought up. If that wasn't bad enough, his defense for his involvement was, "I didn't scam anyone, But the people I surrounded myself with in this project were all very untrustworthy, some being felons. I didn't do any of the scamming they did, except he was the lead of the project. I used to respect him for bringing himself out of the rubble of the Japan controversy. He really made something of himself, and then he ruined it again. What's the best joke you know? An Irish man walks into a pub. What'll you have? The bartender asks. Give me 3 pints of Guinness, please, says the man. The bartender brings him 3 pints, and the man proceeds to sip them alternately, the first one, the next one, and then the third one, until they're all gone. He then orders 3 more. Sir, says the bartender, I know you like them cold. You don't have to order 3 at a time. I can keep an eye on you, and when you get Lola, bring you a fresh cold one. You don't understand, the man says. I have 2 brothers, one in Australia and one in the States. We made a vow to each other that every Saturday night we'd still drink together. So right now, my brothers have 3 Guinness too, and we're drinking together. What a wonderful tradition, the bartender says, smiling. Every week after that, the man comes into the bar and orders 3 beers, but one week he orders only 2. He drinks them and orders 2 more. I know what your tradition is, says the bartender sadly, and I'd just like to say that I'm sorry that one of your brothers died. Oh, me brothers are fine, says the man. I just quit drinking. His girlfriend thinks he is cheating on her with me. She freaks out and puts us both in the hospital. Jeff, M, 20, and I, F, 18, live together in an apartment. It's just cheaper. The apartment is right between his job and my college. We each have a room and a large kitchen, bathroom, and living room. Just perfect. When Jeff met Suzanne, F, 20, I didn't initially realize that Jeff was in a relationship. We seldom saw each other. I didn't even realize his girlfriend slept with him. As I was standing in the kitchen on a Sunday, just in my PJs, suddenly this person was standing in front of me, naked, and yelled at me what I was doing in the apartment. I tried to calmly explain to her that I lived here, but she didn't want to listen. Like a fury, she ran into Jeff's room and started yelling at him about how he could cheat on her. I'm sure she slapped him in the face a few times, too. She ran back into the kitchen and went for my throat when Jeff intervened and tried to explain the situation to her, but she just couldn't be calmed down. The kettle was just finished. Before Jeff or I could do anything, she grabbed the kettle and poured the hot water over Jeff. He immediately fell to the ground screaming. Suzanne threw the hot kettle at my head, so I was knocked out. When I came to, I called the ambulance and Jeff and I were taken to the hospital. Jeff had to stay a few days because of the burns. On the second day, Suzanne stood in the room as if nothing had happened, and I apologized. I just looked at her and told her to fuck off. She ruined my brother's face. My husband got our girlfriend pregnant without discussing it with me. My husband, 38, and I, 30, are in an open marriage. We've been married for 5 years and open for the past 2 years. Currently, we have a long-term girlfriend, 26, that we have both been with for just over a year. I'm also 30 weeks pregnant, and we're also excited to welcome our daughter into the world soon. Our relationship and time in the bedroom has never been better, until the other day when our girlfriend announced her pregnancy to us. I was so surprised, I didn't know she had been seeing anyone else. After I congratulated her, I asked who was the father, and she said that my husband was. This was something that we never talked about at all, so I politely asked her to leave while I discussed this with my husband. Apparently, her seeing me pregnant and so excited convinced her that she was ready for motherhood herself, and she told my husband that she would be stopping her birth control. My husband never told this to me, and neither did our girlfriend. So the entire time we've been together for the past few months, they were having completely unprotected intimacy without my knowledge, which was not part of our arrangement. I'm still his wife, and she's just our girlfriend. I feel so betrayed by my husband to go behind my back like that. They don't understand why I'm mad. They think that I should be happy. I was aware that my husband has a breeding fetish, so do I. But this is much different than just role-playing situations, and they don't seem to understand that. I don't know how else to express to them how disrespectful that was to me. We had a written agreement that birth control is to be used with our partners. We even discussed in that same written agreement that any pregnancies would not continue if it were to fail, but this was intentional and non-consensual.
A toxic ex sent me an unsolicited pic, so I sent it to his wife. The title says it all. This happened a few years ago. I was with a guy for almost 2 years, and ended it when I caught him cheating after suspecting it for a while. Several years passed by, and he kept trying to talk to me / get us back together, all before and after he got this girl pregnant and married her. I blocked him for several years. He tried to talk to me via other numbers. I blocked them too. I had deleted WhatsApp for a period of time, reinstalled it later to use, not realizing after deleting the account and reinstalling it, it removes blocked numbers from the account. Sure enough, after some time, he tried talking to me again, confessing his undying love. He was married with 2 kids at this point. Before I had a chance to block him, since I was busy at work, he sent me a pretty graphic photo of his member. The photo was in his supposed bedroom with plenty of background details of the room. I snapped a photo of the one-sided conversation and proverbial unsolicited image and sent it to his wife via Facebook Messenger. My family knows his family, so she wasn't difficult to find, despite him being blocked on my end. I kept it brief, but I told her I'm his ex he cheated on, to be wary of his ways, and that I'm sorry to have to show her this. I blocked his number again, keeping in mind about keeping WhatsApp activated, and moved on with my life. They are still together in a seemingly turbulent marriage. I feel terrible because they have kids and she seems like a nice person, but he's a piece of junk. I felt this was appropriate to share here.
What's your best? I didn't just dodge a bullet, but a tactical nuke story. There were a few days where all my appliances were breaking down. First the clothes washer, then the air conditioner, then the dishwasher. Then one morning before leaving for work, the refrigerator stopped cooling. I was in a terrible mood on my commute to work, and then I had a flat tire in the middle of rush hour traffic. I pulled over to the shoulder. Normally I would have got out immediately and started changing it. I can change a tire in 5 minutes, it wouldn't have even made me late, but everything breaking in the days leading up to this flat had me defeated. I rested my head on the steering wheel a few seconds and said out loud, "Why me when?" Almost as an answer, I was hit from behind. Traffic is slowed because of my pulling over, and an ambulance driver transporting a patient between hospitals decided to go around the traffic by driving in the breakdown lane. Damage to my vehicle was minor, but if it had been any other day, I would have been taking my jack and spare out at that moment and been crushed between my car and the ambulance. Everything worked out great. I got a 5-figure settlement from the ambulance company as they were clearly at fault hitting a car in the breakdown lane. It was a non-emergency transportation of a patient. And when I got home that day, all the appliances were miraculously working again. Police officers, what are the most ridiculous cover stories you've heard from people you were questioning? Some kids were shooting bottle rockets, no big deal, but they were in an area where there had been some burglaries, so we checked it out. There were 3 of them when we pulled up, maybe 14 years old. Here's the thing though, they were pretty well cornered. On one side was a pond, on another side was a huge fence with barbed wire, and finally there was one side with an unclimbable embankment that led to some railroad tracks. Like I said, we had them cornered. 2 of them take off for the embankment and hide in the grass while one runs towards the fence. Well, the 2 that ran for the embankment were pretty well hidden, but Mr. Solo realized the fence had barbed wire, panicked and decided to lay flat on his belly in ankle-high grass, hoping we couldn't see him. We walked up and asked him to get to his feet. Nothing. We repeated the directions. Do you know what he did? He rolled over, faked the biggest yawn he could muster, and started stretching this way and that. Then he asked, "Sorry, what? I was just sleeping." The whole scene was too funny. The officer and I start hysterically laughing. Tell the kid he's not in trouble and remind him not to run from the police. This kid really thought he could pretend he just woke up from a nap after we had just watched him sprint across the field and lay down. Good times. What's the most depressed you've ever felt during a video game? Weird answer, but I was playing Minecraft. One day, me and my friends started a game and only took around 30 minutes grabbing supplies to craft things like starter weapons and all of that basic stuff. It was already around 1 a.m., so we went to sleep and started the server up again the next day. While we were planning on how to build our base, I decided to go into a cave. I brought torches, a bucket of water, my weapons and whatnot. After around 20-30 minutes of exploring, I came to a dead end with a wolf sitting there. I was extremely confused because wolves don't usually just spawn in caves. This sort of freaked me out because it was just standing there as if it was waiting for someone. Waiting for me. I checked my inventory and it turned out I had some meat. Using the last bits of pork chops I had left, I brought her up to our base and I ended up taming her. I dyed her collar orange because it's the color I always give my dogs, and brought her with me everywhere for protection against anything that attacked me. I gave her a name, Pumpkin, with a little bit of work involving a name tag and an anvil. We remained as good friends as any player in their Minecraft pet would. She helped us fight mobs, went across the million seas with us, ate our Minecraft dinners with my friends and I. But one day while we were exploring, we decided that we shouldn't check the location coordinates, not even to go and find each other. We just described the island we were on, as if all of us could remember the islands, and for the most part, we could remember them. When we got back to our homeland, we continued on with our Minecraft days. We didn't notice that Pumpkin wasn't with us, and that she didn't teleport back until a couple of hours of playing later. I was absolutely freaking devastated. I remember actually crying about it after a while, and my friends all laughed at me, but later on tried to cheer me up. I demanded we went back and searched for the islands to go and get her. We never found her. What's the biggest plot twist you've seen in real life? During the last year of my grandfather's life, he had dementia and was having trouble keeping track of reality. Before he was placed into hospice, he kept complaining about a man that was in his house. He would say that he would come around at night and that he was taking his things and using his stuff. Grandma, of course, kept reassuring him that she was the only one there. His doctor increased his medications because he was losing touch with reality so badly. Fast forward to my grandfather's funeral, and a man showed up that wasn't known by more than a few people in the family. Turns out he was an old friend of my grandmother's who showed up to give his support. In a small town like that, it wasn't exactly an unusual thing to have random people show up to the funeral home who knew the person at some point. Well, about a year later, my grandmother let slip that she is seeing someone, the guy from funeral. At this point, nothing too odd. They got to talking at church and we thought it was sweet. Then a bit later, sweet innocent old grandma mentions that it's their 3rd anniversary. Grandpa passed 2 years prior. This man was the person that Grandpa saw in his house every night. He was the reason that everyone thought Grandpa was going crazy. He was the reason that my grandfather was medicated to the point of being a vegetable for the last horrible year of his life.
My husband can't make me finish. So the title basically says it all. My husband and I have been together 10 years, married for 6. The intimate life has gotten boring, to say the least. We went from having fun time every day to once, maybe twice a month. I brought it up to him because I told him I missed it. He brushed it off and told me he, quote, felt comfortable, so he didn't really think to put in any effort. That made me sad, but I expressed how I felt and put it out there. Nothing changed. Still very infrequent. Regardless, I was watching a TikTok the other day and the woman was talking about how a man has never made her finish. I thought it was absurd, but it had me thinking about our intimate life. Has he ever made me finish if I'm doing the work? It's pitiful, honestly. He initiates it because I stopped since I was turned down so many times. The initiation is most likely him asking me to go down on him. There's not really any touching. Or kissing. Which I miss. It's usually me going down until I feel like getting on top. I usually do all the work. Sometimes I can get off. Other times he finishes so fast I don't have a chance to. And if he does, I have to get off of him. There's no making sure I get there too. No foreplay. And it's been like this for as long as I can remember. I don't really even remember when he took his time to take care of my needs. I see what the lady in the TikTok was talking about. I'm having a bit of a meltdown because he thinks there's nothing wrong, but I am frustrated every single day. But I also feel like my nagging would turn him off from trying as well. My husband is the only man I've been with, so I don't know if this is normal or what. Someone please help.
What racist things do people do that they don't think is racist? I'm a white dude that has lived in Japan for 16 years. A while back I went on a date with a Japanese girl and we went to a bar in central Tokyo. The bar wouldn't let me in because I wasn't Japanese. This has happened so many times I didn't bother me, however the girl got really upset. After we were rejected from the bar, she said, "I don't know why they wouldn't let you in, you were with me. I'm Japanese." And I was thinking that kind of misses the point. Can you imagine if a white and black dude went to a bar together in the States and they don't let the black dude in and the white guy says, "I can't believe they didn't let you in. You're with me. I'm white." I even called the cops on a club once that had a sign that said Japanese only. The cops came in, I complained in Japanese, and the cops said in a super friendly tone, "Well, yeah, the sign says Japanese only and you're not Japanese. What's the problem here? There's another club down the street that allows foreigners. I like that one myself. Why don't you go check that one out?" Japan is so inherently racist and xenophobic to the point that they don't even know that they are racist and xenophobic. It's just normal behavior to them, but for some reason everybody loves Japan, and they somehow get a free pass on it. Oh, and full disclosure, I ended up marrying the girl that I went to date with. Now we're racist to each other all the time. It's super fun. I surprised my girlfriend with Taylor Swift tickets. She wanted to bring her friend instead. Me and my girlfriend have been dating for 3 years now. My girlfriend is a huge Taylor Swift fan and was really excited when she found out Taylor would be performing at MetLife Stadium, right near us. I decided to surprise her with Taylor Swift concert tickets, since I knew she really wanted to go. I called in sick the day the tickets dropped, and waited in the Ticketmaster queue for 2 hours. Finally, when it opened up, I bought 2 seats, for $400 each, presumably one for her, and another for me. When she came back from work that night, I surprised her with the tickets, and she was ecstatic. However, when I claimed I was excited to go with her, she got very confused, and claimed she thought the 2 tickets were for her and her best friend, who is also a big Taylor Swift fan. I was very disappointed since I believed that this was an experience we could do together, and it would be something we would remember for the rest of our lives. My girlfriend could tell I was upset, and said she would be happy to go with me instead. I told her she should go with whoever she wanted to go with more, and to not go with me just because it was what I had planned. After hearing this, my girlfriend immediately called her friend and told her that they were going to the Taylor Swift concert together. Ouch. I told my girlfriend that if her friend wanted to go with her, she had to pay the $400 for the ticket, and her friend agreed to. While my girlfriend and her friend went together and both had a great time, I felt betrayed since she chose her over me. While I know my girlfriend's BFF is a much bigger Taylor Swift fan than me, I was still excited to go since I've never been to a concert before, and I like to listen to some of Taylor Swift's songs. Like I said before, I also believe this would be a memory we could both remember together. Should I have done things differently and not given up my ticket so willingly? Is it normal for my son to watch me undress? My son is now married and 27 years old. He still watches me even though I'm 50 years old. It started when I caught him in action. He was in his 20s, and my poor boy didn't have a girlfriend at that time. I had stepped out of the shower to my room in my undergarments, drying my hair with a towel, to wear clothes that I had laid out on the bed. I would usually close my door to the room, but I must have forgotten that particular day, and that's when I saw my son walk past the room. Through the corner of my eye, I could see him taking a quick peep at me, and when I had turned my face towards the door, he wasn't there anymore. It made me laugh. The next day, the very same thing happened. I had kept the door open and saw him walking by when I came out of the shower. When this happened on the third day, it confirmed that this was no coincidence. I am someone who has struggled with weight my whole life, and as a chubby woman, when he was spying on me, made me more confident about my body. This trend continued for a while, where I acted innocent and wore my clothes in front of him, and one day I decided to give him an eyeful. The next morning I stepped out of the shower naked. Judging by his look, this was something which my son hadn't anticipated. I looked towards the door, and this time he was too slow, and so I caught him officially. I called his name out and instructed him to come in. He walked in scared and had his head down and apologized. I covered my breasts with one hand and had my crotch covered with the other. I pardoned him and told him it was okay as long as it stayed between the two of us. I uncovered myself and put hands on my hips and told him he didn't have to spy on me anymore and could just look at me whenever he wanted to. He was shocked and had his mouth open. He couldn't believe it. His eyes were fixated at my breasts. He became shy and he wanted to step out of the room, but I told him to stay put. I turned around 360 and gave him a show and asked him about my body. He said it looked great, and he claimed that I was the first woman he had seen naked, so that made my day. It felt really exciting when he saw me in my birthday suit. With time, he became normalized with my body and nudity. He moved out and got married, and last week he came to visit with his wife. His wife must have gone out somewhere, and when it was just the two of us at home, he asked me when I would be taking my shower. This was my cue to get undressed, and so I did. I feel flattered every time he does that, and I feel beautiful that I still look desirable to men his age. My wife's affair just ended, and she wants to play it off as nothing happened. My wife and I have been together for 12 years and married for 8. For about 6 months, my wife has been very distant and very protective of her phone. In hindsight, I probably should have seen this red flag. Her escapes were, I'm going to Target to return something, but then she wouldn't come home for 3 or 4 hours. I'd ask her why, and she'd always say she was just looking through the store with her Starbucks. So I didn't think much of it. Possible red flag too. This is where it really jumped on my radar when I realized she did this every Saturday afternoon. Plus, she never came back with a Starbucks cup, and when I checked the account, it didn't show any charges. So one day I asked if I made her happy. She giggled and said yes in a sarcastic way and rolled her eyes. I have to say, watching that hurt. Especially when she used to immediately say yes, making eye contact and giving me a kiss. So what I did next made me feel bad, but I bought an AirTag and placed it in the lining of her purse. I only did this because when I confronted her about her Saturday afternoon trip, she got very defensive about it, saying she deserves time to herself, which I agree, but then said Chris likes seeing her. I was like, who is Chris? My wife said he works at the Starbucks. Anyway, one Saturday after she left to go to Target, I was watching her location, and she did go to Target for about 10 minutes. Then she left and went to an apartment building. That's when I got in my car and went to that location. I went to the front office to see if I could get access to the apartment and told them the story. Turns out Chris has always been a jerk to the front office, and they were more than happy to help. They lead me to the apartment and let me in. I could hear noises coming from the bedroom with the door cracked open a bit. I took out my phone and from the cracked open door recorded about 30 seconds of them doing the deed. I left and drove home in shock. I couldn't believe she'd do this to me. I know I'm not the easiest guy to get along with. I'm a Marine Corps veteran and I've been diagnosed with PTSD and a TBI. For years I've been doing therapy and trying like hell to be the husband she deserved. This whole thing shattered me to the core. When my wife came home later, I was in a mood, so I completely shut down. Usually she asks what she can do to help me, but this time she just said, "Another mood, huh? Oh, well, I'm going to shower." I was like that until Monday when I could see a lawyer. Showed my lawyer everything I had and that I wanted a divorce. He said he'd write up the paperwork and have it for me in like a week. Well, that turned into 3 because he had gotten sick and wasn't able to work. No biggie. But during those 3 weeks of waiting for the papers, my wife went back to her normal ways. Only thing I could come up with was the affair ended, but I wasn't sure. After 3 weeks, I get the papers and gave them to her. She was shocked and asked why I wanted a divorce. I showed her the video and she was in shock at first, then angered that I'd follow her and record that. She explained it meant nothing and everything's back to normal since he ended it. A part of me still loves her still, but the other part is destroyed, and the 30 seconds video is burned into my brain. She suggested marriage counseling, but I don't know what to do. It hurts to think about my situation and I needed an outlet. So I came here to vent, and I guess if anyone reads this, if they have some advice or anything. What started off as a small lie, but then snowballed into this, is my life now. My wife thinks we met on the internet. We didn't. We actually met on a bus, almost a full year before we met for the first time. I was utterly captivated by the way she looked, the way she dressed, and oh God, how lucky I felt when she sat down beside me. I deliberately missed my stop just to stay next to her for an extra 30 minutes, and then got off where she did and immediately stopped, pretending to make a phone call as she walked off. I waited until she was too far away to hear me, and seeing that she hadn't looked back at any point, I found the courage to follow her home. With her address at hand, I returned to my own home to try and find the name. I didn't have any luck trawling public records, so in desperation, I had MySpace bring up the profile of every female user in the area. I scrolled through page after page of profile pic thumbnails, and I recognized her instantly. What followed was 9 months of trying to contact her. I didn't rate my chances highly, so I decided to contact her first on some fake profiles to give myself a safe sandbox to get to know her without any risk of my mistakes damaging my chances with her, when I felt I knew enough about her to contact her from a genuine profile. It was tough at first. The first 2 accounts didn't even get responses out of her, so I started looking at the profiles of her existing friends and mimicked those, copying their interests and music tastes. I started chatting with her, first from one identity, then from another. At one point I was talking to her under 3 different names at once, each with a different personality, as I tried to figure out who her perfect guy was. Eventually, when I was ready, I friended one of my fake profiles with my real one, and then had the fake me invite the real me into a group chat with her. We connected instantly. It was magical. I could always say exactly what she wanted to hear. My sense of humor was perfect, my politics and worldview mirrored her own, and we loved the same music. We had so much in common. It took me just 1 more month to finally meet her in person for the first time. I was absolutely paranoid she'd recognize me as the guy on the bus that one time, but she didn't. 2 years later I married her, despite our entire relationship being founded on my lies. Whenever I think about it, I feel like a scumbag, a creep, a stalker, or some kind of criminal. But then I look at her and she's here, happy with me still. It's me who suffers with the truth, not her. My neighbor who thought I was gay my whole life found out I'm in fact straight, a hard way. I, 25 male, have grown up beside these neighbors, 50s female and 50s male, my whole life, and close to their daughter, 24 female. We spent almost all of our time together. Her mom has always thought I was feminine, not quite right, and just funny. Bet she thought I was frickin' hilarious last night walking in on me deep in her daughter. I came home to my parents' house from working out of state, and the neighbor's daughter saw me pull in. We talked, reconnected, and decided to chill since her parents were out of town and she was house-sitting. We rode around listening to music, smoking her up, dinner, and lil Netflix and chill. One thing led to another and eventually had her legs hanging on my shoulders, making it sound like mac and cheese. We didn't hear the door, but we heard the "oh my God." I'm diving for my clothes, her mom's freaking out, and she's covering herself with a blanket. I go running out of the front door with just shorts on as her dad's carrying stuff to the door. I hopped into my car and drove off like a bat out of hell. Now I'm sitting here beside the lake in my car. My mom texted me saying neighbors are furious, and we all need to talk this out. My dad called trying to be stern, but knowing that we were both adults and grew up together, he just said he's surprised it didn't happen sooner. I made a dude get his nuts waxed on the first date after he lied to me. When I was in my early 20s and online dating was just starting, I made a profile, and said I was just not going to be into two things: smokers and people with kids. Just that. You could be anything else, and if the chemistry is there, we are all good. I meet this guy early in the morning for a breakfast date, and we are hitting it off averagely. No sparks but no red flags. The date goes for 2.5 hours, breakfast taking forever, until we are splitting the bill and he tells me he has a kid. I ask him if he read my profile to know that I was not interested in that, and he says, "Yes, I read that, but knew that if you just spent some time with me, you'd see how great I am, and how you'd be willing to see past that." I was floored, as now he wasted 3 hours of my life and was okay with being a liar. That was unacceptable to me. I said, "Well, I don't want this date to end, but I have to go across town to get my Brazilian, where they take all the hair off, including the bumhole. Done in an hour. Want to come with me and get one too? It's not painful, a total lie, and I think it's attractive on men to be clean there. No pressure, but I'm pretty busy the rest of the week, and this is my only free day." He was all about following me anywhere. I told the ladies that this was his first time and that they should take everything, including the butt. He held my hand between a curtain, and we both got them done at the same time. He screamed a lot, but was a champ and went through with it. I made him pay for his own and never called him again. If you are out there, Chris, please don't lie to women on the first date. It's a really bad way to start a relationship. I cheated on my boyfriend, and now he's a millionaire. I cheated on my boyfriend when I was 21. I'm 33 now, and I still think about it pretty much every day. I've also never been unfaithful since, and I think it's because how he reacted to finding out. I drove over to his house, sat him down at the table, looked him in the eye and said, "Jake, I'm really sorry, but I've been unfaithful to you. If I was in his situation, I would go absolutely crazy. I'd say something like, 'Who is it?' or 'How could you do this to me?' Instead, he got up, walked to the door, and just said, 'Get out.' I said, 'You're not going to yell at me.' And he said, 'What's the point?' So I got up, and as I walked to the door, I said, 'I'm really sorry.' He just looked at me and said, 'I don't ever want to see you again. Don't text me. Don't call me. Don't come to my house, and I wish you the best of luck.' Remember, this guy is only 21 at the time, and he was that mature about the situation. I really messed up, and I didn't realize how much of a catch he was until he was already gone. He owns a business now, and has a beautiful wife and kids making 3 times more than I do. I'm just happy he's doing good, and I hate myself every day for doing that to such an amazing guy. I guess the main point of this post is to show that no matter how bad things are now, it's only temporary, and you should use it as fuel to help you be a better person in the future. I'm scared of my wife, and it low-key turns me on. Let me start off by saying that I'm a 27-year-old guy, and my wife is 26. We've been together for 9 years and married for 7. It's safe to say that our relationship has grown in ways I never thought possible, but I've stumbled upon a realization that I never thought I'd admit to. I'm kind of turned on by how intimidating my wife can be. I've always been an introvert. I shy away from confrontation and generally just prefer to be left to my own devices. When my wife and I started dating when we were around 17, it was she who did all the pursuing. I had liked her for like 3 years, but never had the courage to tell her. So when I finally did, she took charge and asked me out. In fact, she initiated almost every milestone in our relationship. She's an extrovert to the core, loud, fierce, and never backing down, especially if she knows she's right. And those are all qualities I genuinely love about her. But a couple of weeks ago, something strange happened. I was out with my friends, and we were casually talking about our spouses. One of my friends made a comment about how intense my wife can be, and without thinking, I blurted out that it kind of turned me on. I immediately blushed and felt embarrassed, staying quiet for the rest of the outing. But the thought stuck with me. When I got home, I started thinking about it more and realized how much her attitude and strong nature resonated with me, and not just in an intimate way. Whenever she's passionate about something and stands up for it, I find myself feeling a surge of pride and excitement. I can't help but smile like a goofy teenager, thinking, that's my wife. Today, something happened that brought all these feelings to the forefront again. We got into a bit of a fight. We usually don't argue in front of the kids, but we do have moments when we're not as loving to one another. She was feeding our daughter, and when I walked into the room, she gave me the nastiest glare you could think of. I was taken aback, and yet I felt this strange thrill. I can't quite put my finger on why I feel this way or if this is even normal. What's your most disgusting childhood story? I didn't wash under my foreskin for 15 years. This happened when I was in 9th grade. I grew up not knowing anything about my weenie or how to clean it. My parents never taught me anything about genitals. I never asked, I only knew where the pee came out. So one day in 9th grade biology, Our teacher covered the male reproductive system. She reached a point where she mentioned that for uncircumcised males, the foreskin is supposed to retract over the head of the rod. I was pretty shocked because that's certainly not how mine worked. By that time, I was a daily meat beater, and my foreskin could barely go back enough for me to see the entrance of the urethra. So armed with my new knowledge about how my weenie was supposed to work, I went home, and a few Google searches led me to discover that I had a severe phimosis. So being the young buck I am, I also Googled how to fix it. There were two options: either tell my parents and have them take me to a doctor for surgery, or do stretching exercises. Not wanting to tell any, either tell my parents and have them take me to a doctor for surgery, or do stretching exercises. Not wanting to tell any of this to my parents, or have someone come near my willy with a scalpel, I opted for the latter option. I got some baby oil, the only lube available at the time besides my mom's bottle of expensive olive oil, and went to work. After about 4 hours of stretching, I finally made some progress. I could see a slightly bigger area now, not just the opening of my pee hole like before. Everything was going great except for one thing. The underside of my foreskin was releasing one of the most pungent cheese smells I had ever encountered. It was the most disgusting thing I've smelled even to this day. It finally hit me. My weenie had not been clean my entire life up until that point. Over the next couple days, I kept stretching. Once I was able to see more surface area of my willy, I discovered this thick, gooey, greenish-brown sludge leaking from under my foreskin. After some quick research, I learned that this was smegma, also known as cheese. I cleaned it off whenever it seeped out during my stretching exercises. As much as it disgusted me, everything was still going fine. That was about to change. So this was about 10 days into my stretching, and I'd gotten my foreskin about to the halfway mark. What story is 100% true but still blows your mind? In 2004, Mitch was in his final semester at a college in Louisiana when he met another senior named Kayla. The moment he saw her, he knew he was in love. After graduation, the pair stayed in Louisiana and moved in together while they got their careers off the ground. He was completely infatuated with her. 2 years later, the pair got married, and shortly after, Kayla got pregnant. By the time their daughter was born, Mitch was making so much money that Kayla became a stay-at-home mom full-time. By the time their daughter was born, Mitch was making so much money that Kayla became a stay-at-home mom full-time. By the time their daughter was 2 years old, they had their son. Mitch was a complete family man, and his life was perfect. A few months after his son's birth, Mitch was lounging in the TV room when something strange caught his eye. He noticed that the red lamp in the corner of the room was looking blurry. He rubbed his eyes and looked around the room, but nothing else was blurry. When he focused back onto the lamp, he noticed that the lamp was still distorted. Even after turning the TV off and walking over to the lamp, it was still blurry. When he focused back onto the lamp, he noticed that the lamp was still distorted. Even after turning the TV off and walking over to the lamp, it was still blurry. He didn't have bad eyesight and was completely confused. He thought that it must have been an anomaly, so he turned back to the family room and turned the TV back on. However, no matter how hard he tried, the distorted lamp was in his peripheral vision the whole time. It bothered him to the point that he turned the TV back off and went to investigate the lamp once more. This time, he noticed that the lamp was not only blurry, but it was now upside down. Now he was genuinely concerned that there was something wrong with him. Nothing else in the entire room was blurry or upside down. A few minutes later, his wife and kids get home, and he decides to not tell his family about it. He is determined to figure it out himself. After dinner, the family plays some games together. Then everybody goes upstairs and falls asleep. But after everyone had gone to sleep, Mitch was laying in bed thinking about this lamp. Finally, he snuck out of his bed and he just stared at this lamp. He spent hours watching this lamp morph, turn upside down, and get more distorted. The next day, Kayla found Mitch passed out on the couch. Mitch still doesn't tell her about the lamp. Kayla asked what was going on, and he told her that he wasn't feeling well and was not going to go to work that day. But Mitch didn't go to work for 3 more days. He just sat on the couch, fixated on the lamp. Kayla picked up on his strange behavior, but Mitch never told her about the lamp. He kept telling her that he wasn't feeling well. She pleads for him to go see a doctor, but every time Mitch would say he's all right. As this lamp became larger and more distorted, Mitch became unable to respond to his wife. He became totally unresponsive, so Kayla decided to call a doctor to figure out what was going on. While she's on the phone, Mitch notices that the lamp is growing exponentially. It grew to the size of the room itself, and all he could see was the color red. Then Mitch starts to notice voices and screams coming from somewhere in the distance. He feels this blinding pain in his head. He opens his eyes and sees that he's laying on the sidewalk across from a building at his college with a crowd of people staring at him. He has no idea what's going on, so he naturally starts scanning the crowd looking for his wife and kids. But before he could find his family, a police officer ran over to him, picked him up, ran back to his police car, put him in the back, and drove off. When Mitch is in the back of the police car, he asks the officer what's going on. The officer would tell him that he was attacked by a huge college football player and had been knocked unconscious. Mitch then asks where his wife and kids are, to which the officer said that he had no idea. That's when it clicked. The lamp wasn't real. Neither was his wife and kids. It was all a hallucination while he was unconscious. He had experienced 10 years of his life in just a few moments. Mitch was taken to the hospital where he would make a full physical recovery. Unfortunately, after he was released, he was horribly depressed and had to get intense therapy to grieve for the family that didn't exist. Unfortunately, after he was released, he was horribly depressed and had to get intense therapy to grieve for the family that didn't exist. Today I messed up by agreeing to a trio with my best friend. I, 19 female, and my best friend Eva, 19 female, have been inseparable since 5th grade. Her and I are polar opposites. I'm mixed on the shorter side with brown eyes and hair, and a bit chunky, I'll admit. While Eva is white, blonde hair, green eyes with a lanky athletic build. She's very extroverted. I'm on the shyer side. She's the one that got all the boys' attention. I was the supportive best friend. I've always thought she was the most attractive girl I've had the pleasure of meeting. Earlier last week, Eva said she's been watching a lot of trio adult films and started having thoughts about being with another girl. I'm bisexual myself, and pretty shy when it comes to intimacy, as I only lost my virginity last year and have had one intimate partner since. Eva, again, is the exact opposite. She's been an intimate since her early teens and has been open about her intimate life. We have always joked about being gay for each other. We give each other a quick peck on the lips when we have to go after hanging out. And we even made a pact that if we're married by 30, we'll marry each other. So this led me to jokingly saying we should have a trio with someone to find out if she's bi or not. And she seriously agreed, which I obviously didn't turn down. We decided to make a Tinder account with both of us explaining how we just want someone, preferably a guy, as to her request, to join us, no strings attached. After finding a suitable match, we met up beforehand to explain the boundaries and rules we talked about. The next day would be when it all happened. For me, it was a great experience, and afterwards Eva agreed. Now, as much as me and Eva are opposite, one thing we absolutely do have in common is our taste in men. I don't want to sound pretentious, but I do feel the man paid a bit more attention to me than Eva. Later, the guy we were intimate with gave me his number afterwards while Eva was cleaning up in the bathroom. I thought he did the same with her. This is where it all falls apart. After the fact, she said she said no strings attached, but she wanted to see the guy again. I of course told her to go for it, but when she checked on Tinder to message him, he is unmatched and she wasn't too happy about. I just said to text him, and she said she didn't have his number. Confused, I said, well, he gave it to me. She got absolutely furious, saying how that was selfish and rude, that I was trying to keep him for myself, and I wanted too much attention from men. I tried to explain I thought he had also given her his number, but she wouldn't listen. We haven't had a fight this big ever. She hasn't called or texted me back since then. I feel like such a bad friend for letting a random person come between us like that. I will admit I did text the guy telling him the situation, and we have had a couple of conversations since. I just don't want 8 years of friendship going down the drain, especially if it's my fault. My boyfriend took his shirt off in front of me for the first time. It changed our lives. My boyfriend and I have been together for 8 months, and he has been hesitant to take his shirt off around me. He was S8 by one of his uncles from the age of 9 until he was 13 years old, and the trauma he has is still there. He never took his shirt off as a kid and gets really uncomfortable when people touch him. He didn't let me hug him or hold his hand the first month we were together. The first time he asked for a hug, I nearly cried. He is the most handsome man in the world and has the biggest heart imaginable. I'm happy to be his girlfriend. He is really into fitness and goes to the gym almost every day. He started working out when he was 15 as a way for him to take back control of his body, and he really enjoys it. He struggles with anxiety and considers me and the gym his safe spaces. He has a really nice body and works hard to maintain his physique. Last night he came to my apartment and was complaining about being sore. We were laying on my bed watching TV, and he kept moving around and trying to get comfortable. He fell down some stairs 2 months ago and sprained his AC joint. Yesterday was the first time he has been able to work out that shoulder. He was really uncomfortable, so I asked him if I could rub and massage it for him. He shut the idea down initially. However, I assured him that he was safe with me and I would not do anything to him he didn't want. He was still unsure but said he wanted to take this step with me. I offered to take my shirt off with him, and after a minute of reassurance he agreed. We took off our shirts and he looked so beautiful. He moved up in front of me and I began rubbing his shoulders. He flinched at first but relaxed and said it was helping. He asked me not to touch his lower back, so I stayed around his shoulders and neck. I massaged his shoulders for about a half hour and told him all the things I love about him, and he was so calm and relaxed. He spent the night, and when I woke up this morning he was in between my arms. We didn't go to sleep like that, so he must have moved next to me in the middle of the night. I started rubbing his back and he woke up and moved closer. It was our first time sharing a moment of intimacy and it was so beautiful. He left an hour later and sent me a text thanking me for treating him with love and respect. I did it. I can't begin to express how I feel. Today I messed up by cheating with my coworker and planning to run away together. I work in international live events that take weeks to pull off. I typically coordinate them and work with a team to install and operate. I'm close with my coworkers, but we live across the world and fly into every event. I've met most of my coworkers in person, but at this event we had someone new working sound, Clint. I'd seen him in Zoom calls, but we hadn't interfaced directly. This event was a big one for the company, a big headliner and big partners with a lot of money being tossed around. I arrived at the install, got caught up to speed, met Clint, and got to work. One by one, my coworkers were sent off to other events. Clint and I were left to finish everything up, but bad weather and huge letdowns by one of our vendors had us in hot water. We started working 15 to 20-hour days to get everything done on time. After our long haul days, Clint and I would hang out and blaze. Legally, we had a lot in common. And we were vibing like neither of us had felt before. We were both married, unhappily. His wife had a bunch of medical problems and was really good at spending money and never leaving school. My husband had turned into an angry person, had built up a pile of debt, and was not putting anything into the relationship. It started out platonic, but things got extremely stressful, and our intimate tension started building up. The lack of sleep, stress, and my lower tolerance for Zaza left me questioning everything about my life. We both felt like the other person was an extension of ourselves. We were kindred spirits. Slowly, Clint started making moves, and suddenly dinners were turning into dates, and we were hanging out in each other's hotel rooms. We crossed many lines, but right as we crossed the final line, my brain kicked back in, and we decided to take care of our lives before going further. Over the last few days at the event, Clint and I continued to be close. We made plans to leave our spouses, sell our houses, and travel together. We created a bucket list of places to go, things to do, and see together. We even talked about eventually building a little cabin. Clint had planned on getting a tattoo dedicated to me when he returned home. At the end of the event, we went our separate ways and kept in touch virtually. Lots of dirty texting and unprofessionalism all around. We had agreed we wouldn't tell our partners about the affair, as they each have mental health issues, but we planned to divorce and move on with our lives. After a few days at home, I talked with my husband and asked for a divorce. I told him I wanted to move away and start my life over. Clint talked to his wife, but things were messier. She was volatile, and her family made it difficult for Clint to outright leave her. Eventually, I noticed Clint was becoming distant, still intimate, but not as emotionally available. He sent me pictures of his new tattoos, which were nothing like what he had said he was planning for me. Alarm bells were going off in my head, but I kept plodding along, planning mine and our escape. Clint went off to a series of anniversary-related dates with his wife and kept leaving me on read. I asked him what was going on a number of times. Finally, after weeks of mixed signals, Clint told me he was having doubts. We video chatted during work, and he told me he owed it to his wife to try and make things work. Now, I'm left to pick up the pieces of my life. Most of my friends are my coworkers, so I have no one to talk to about my heartbreak. I don't have the money to fix my problems at home or to leave and live alone in another country. There's no going back with my husband, as I know it would be wrong and I'm no longer interested in carrying the relationship. I'll see Clint again in a few weeks at another event, where we'll likely be left alone for hours at a time. But he plans to stay faithful to his wife, and we never even got to have the mind-blowing lovemaking we talked about. Another event where we'll likely be left alone for hours at a time, but he plans to stay faithful to his wife, and we never even got to have the mind-blowing lovemaking we talked about. I got my sister's bully deported. My sister was bullied relentlessly in high school for something she had literally zero control over, a certain part of her anatomy. Without going into details, she felt terrible about it, and it more or less ruined her life as an insecure 15-year-old girl. The girl was responsible for most of the cruel bullying, and the one who gave her a particularly cruel nickname related to her physical issue was called Nadia. Nadia was a foreign exchange student at our school. Nadia was beautiful, she was cruel, and she didn't give any FCKs about anyone but herself. I wasn't Miss Popular myself, but I had to protect my sister from having her life ruined, and I felt a very strong urge to get back at her tormentors. They say to kill a dragon with many heads, you gotta cut off the main head. So that's what I did. I learned that the father of Nadia was very conservative. Her whole family back home was. So I started spreading rumors about her being very promiscuous and ensured these rumors reached the family she was staying with. This apparently caused her some trouble, but I wasn't done. I threw a party one night when my parents were gone. I invited Nadia, who gladly came as I was, a cooler older girl somehow, and she never said no to a chance to get hammered. Because yes, there was a lot of liquor. I made sure of that. Took pictures of everyone drinking and having fun. That same night when everyone left, I put it on my Facebook and tagged Nadia on it. She had this option turned on where everything she is tagged in is automatically allowed on her timeline. So a picture of her hammered and very skimpily dressed made its way to her page. Because of it being the middle of the night, she must not have noticed until the next day in the morning, so it stayed on for hours. But due to her parents' time zone being vastly different, I was sure they would see it before she had a chance to take it down. They did. She was gone the next week from school and flown back to her home country. Apparently her parents had to save her from being corrupted or something, so she was gone. My sister was safe from ridicule as word of my involvement spread, and let's just say people didn't really want to mess with her after seeing how far I was willing to go to protect my little sister. My husband missed our daughter's birth, so my brother convinced him I was dead. My husband refused to answer my calls while I was in labor, and my brother played a horrible prank. Now my husband is furious, I won't cut him off. My husband and I got in a fight prior to my daughter's birth a week ago, when he casually suggested a paternity test for our daughter when she was born. To be clear, this was completely out of the blue with no warning or reason. I'm a homebody who works remotely with no male friends other than my brother. I told him that he was accusing me of infidelity, and he said he just wanted to be sure, and kept bringing it up until I told him, after 3 days of him asking and the stress starting to make me physically ill, that I didn't want to talk to him and left to my brother's house. I called him while I was gone and tried to work it out, but he refused. After all this, I went home the next day to grab some things while he was at work, and I went into labor. I called him 16 times, before calling my brother, who called him another half a dozen times himself while on the way to pick me up and then on the way to the hospital. It was a horrible and traumatic birth. I started crowning in the car, and the doctor delivered my daughter in the back of my brother's van because I was too far along to move me, before rushing me in when I kept bleeding. It was horrible. I hated it all. My brother's wife, who is a nurse, even told me she honestly thought I wouldn't make it. I also opted for a hysterectomy as it came to that, or something more dangerous. I only ever wanted one or none, but my husband wants a large family. I'm not that great with kids and actually never saw me having children my whole life. I'm trying to bond with my daughter, but it's been hard. The point is that during this, while I was returning from surgery, 10 hours after I called, my husband finally responded and asked why I hadn't answered his call. However, my brother had my phone and was so angry that he said, "This is her brother, I'm at the hospital. She didn't make it," and turned it off. My husband rushed over and got there when I had just woken up and started shouting until the security forced him out, and then didn't get to see our daughter until the next day because I was mostly asleep, and apparently they needed my signature to allow him back. My sister-in-law thinks it was horribly cruel, but that he deserved it. But my brother stands by his prank and says that he only gave my husband 10 minutes of the same fear he had felt at my side for over 10 hours. Whenever he sees my husband, he also keeps telling him that I nearly died because we waited for him. My brother used to be mostly indifferent to my husband, but now he absolutely hates him. You can see it in his face whenever my husband enters the room. And he's been visiting a lot because he doesn't trust my husband to care for me while I'm still healing. My husband is furious that he won't apologize and that I won't make him, and yelled at me when I said that the only reason my brother had my phone was because he wasn't there. I am trying to be empathetic. I know he feels guilty. I've spoken to my therapist, and she says the apathy I'm feeling is likely general and not solely focus on him from lingering shock from the trauma. But didn't say much about the prank. My mother-in-law has been texting me to say that my family is horribly cruel for the prank and that I should go no contact with my brother, and now my husband is saying the same. I just don't know what to do. I'm not in a good headspace. It's been hard to be in the same room with my husband, and I've been sleeping in the guest room with my daughter. He brought up the paternity once, and I just exhaustedly told him to either get out of my face or go stay with his mom if he's planning on stressing me out even more. My wife told me to choose between her or my mom, so I chose divorce. My mom and dad were both orphans. My dad died 2 weeks before I was born, and my mom didn't really have a support system, so we were just the two of us. I never lacked anything because my mother worked all her life to give me the life I have today, and didn't even have time for herself to start a new life again. She did all the little jobs possible so that we didn't miss anything. She deprived herself of food to give me food. I had very good clothes while she had none. I saw her make sacrifices again and again, and always with a smile. Frankly, I always thought she was an angel dressed in a human body. The only time she yelled at me was when I was 16, when I saw her getting sick and working at the same time. I wanted to help her by finding a job, but she was angry and told me it was not my job to take care of her, and it was up to her to take care of me. She wanted me to get really good grades to get into the best universities because it was the only way I can protect myself when she can't anymore. Even at university, she didn't want me to work. I had to be focused on my studies, but she wanted me to volunteer so that I could be an adult who could do something with his hands. I met my wife there while both of us were volunteering. My wife is a good person, but she was never close to her parents or her siblings. Yet she adored my mother since she met her. There were times when I thought she loved my mother more than she loved me, and we laughed about it. Deep down, I think she was looking for the bond between mother and daughter that she did not have from her mother. When I finished my studies, I found a job and we moved in together. But she wasn't comfortable that I call my mom every day. Mind you, those were 10 to 15-minute calls, but eventually she stopped bringing it up. 2 years later, I bought a house for my mother because we never had a house in our name. We lived from apartment to apartment. So for all the sacrifices she made, it was for me the least of it, and it was non-negotiable. That's where the problem started with my wife. She wanted me to think about us first. I told her my dream had always been to buy my mom a house since I was little, and that's what I had to do. But she complained about it to my mom. My mom didn't even know I bought a house for her, as it was supposed to be a surprise for her birthday. She was uncomfortable receiving the house because of my wife and told me that wasn't necessary, and that we could use it for us when we get married. I was furious. I told my mother that the house was for her, and that she could do with it whatever she wanted, but it was time for her to think about herself first. Our relationship survived that. We got married and then we had our own house. Our life was going well until 2 months ago when my mother fell ill. I wanted her to come and live with us so that I could take care of her, but my wife didn't want to. I then decided to rent an apartment with my own money right next to our house so that I could be close to her and go there to take care of her. But even that idea didn't sit well with my wife. Me and my wife don't have children yet. We both work. I usually come home at 6 p.m., but since my mother is sick, I go to see her and come home at 8 p.m. on weekends. I see her for 1 or 2 hours, and the rest of the time I spend with my wife. We go on dates. I always accompany her in her hobbies, even though she never went to mine. 2 days ago, she told me that she thought about it and she thinks I prioritize my mother too much. She told me that I had to choose between my mother and the life I want to build with her. The truth is that I never made her feel that way. We both work, but I'm the one who cooks and I pay a person to do the housework. I make sure I do the dishes she likes. She didn't even know what I like to eat because I never complain. I run her baths, give her massages, flowers. I write her poems that I hide somewhere in the house for her to find out. We go on a trip 1 weekend a month. I earn much more money than her. I told her to keep her money for herself, and I take care of all the bills, even hers. I always make sure to listen to her and consider her opinion. And I think I'm easygoing because I can change my mind to accommodate hers. But I realize that she tries to completely dominate me, and the only subject where I don't give her a choice is my relationship with my mother. So there, I'm going to have a talk with her and put some very clear boundaries. If she doesn't want to, well, we're going to divorce. My parents disowned me after I got pregnant. Now after 10 years, my father has cancer and wants to reconnect. At 16, I slept with my good friend Jared. He was 19 and illiterate, and the condom broke and my daughter was created. My parents, who were great until this point, didn't like that, hated Jared, and wanted me to get an abortion. I couldn't bring it over myself and I wanted to keep the baby. Of course, my parents told me to pack my stuff and leave the house and their lives. So I did. I went to my friend Jared's house and his parents took me in. They weren't thrilled, but they've said that we all had to help as a new family member was in the making. In that time, my friend and I started to develop feelings for each other. I had my daughter, and about 2 months later, Jared's brother came back into their lives. He was a recovering heroin addict. As we had the baby, my mother-in-law told him he could not stay with us. Eventually, they let him stay more and more, and he was spending nights until he had a relapse and stole a bunch of stuff. My parents got wind of that, They dug up a bunch of stuff and found out that my mother-in-law also fought addiction after an accident she had 15 years ago left her addicted to pain meds. So they called Child Protective Services on us, and a whole damn investigation was opened. It was a dark time. I thought they were going to take my baby. In the end, they didn't find anything substantial, but them calling CPS on me transformed into a tradition over the years. As it was a small town, every mistake I made got back to my parents. I was half an hour late to pick up due to my job, CPS charges because of neglect. I was out after 10 p.m. with my toddler, CPS. Christmas, where loads of people stayed at Jared's house because it was a big family, CPS because many strange men were there. They eventually stopped it because they were fined for calling them on me unnecessarily. If they had done it more, I think it could have been an offense. The last call was 5 years ago. Eventually, Jared and I married when I turned 23, and we are quite happy. We worked retail jobs and studied. He went to school for a long time, and it took us longer than average to graduate, but we did. With a lot of help from his parents. Jared is now an engineer, and I work as a graphic designer. We were able to afford a big flat and finally moved out of his parents' house. Our lives look normal now. Anyway, a week ago I get a call from my mother who told me my father was diagnosed with terminal cancer and that his ultimate wish is to see me and my daughter again. I don't really know what to do, because while they didn't have to take care of me while I was pregnant, I wish they had at least supported me. And while I get that they were panicking because they thought I was going to be an unfit mother, they made my life hell for all. I'm finding out my girlfriend of 1 year is deaf as I'm on the bus on my way to see her for the first time. I met her in a match of League of Legends 2 years ago. We talked a lot, became really close, and basically started dating 1 year ago. We send each other pictures all the time and videos as well, so I never understood her apprehension to FaceTime me. We tell each other everything. I mean everything. She's presented me to her parents and I know all her family. Today I was going to surprise her by visiting for the first time. I talked with her sister to make sure it was okay. Less than 30 minutes ago I got a text from her, and I'm copying and pasting a translated version. Hey love, you are so sweet and beautiful, and you deserve so much better. I know you are coming because Sarah told me. I'm sorry to ruin your surprise. I'd hate to see your face when you find out. I know we promised to always be truthful, but I've been lying to you all this time. That was her first paragraph, and I was so scared because I thought she was breaking up with me. But then she continued. You are too caring to ask why I never speak. Why I never sent you a voice note. You are just too perfect, and there's no way you'd be with me if you knew. The reason is very simple. I was born deaf. I'm sorry you have to find out this way. I'm just a coward for not telling you sooner. I'll understand if you don't want to be with me anymore. God damn, I was expecting something totally different, and now I'm scared because I've never interacted with a deaf person, and I want to make sure she gets that I love her either way. I'm still in disbelief that she thought it'd be a deal breaker for me. I would do anything to try and make it work, but I hope she feels the same.